I'm Maggie Hanlon. I'm the Director of Engineering Operations at Luma Health. I'm going to start off by telling you about how I started using ClickUp before sharing key tips for your ClickUp success. So it was the spring of 2019, which now feels like a very long time ago, when I first got my ClickUp account. I'd never used it, and then for the next 2 years, I used it a little bit, but only really to create tasks for engineering or the product team and then following up with them. Back then, we were a way smaller company. We used ClickUp for task management, and that was about it. Then in 2021, my role changed. I had to become way more familiar with ClickUp, and I started to change the way that we use the tool across the company. I also became known as the ClickUp Wizard, which I personally love the title. And then before I knew it, I was really the owner of ClickUp at Luma. So in today's session, my goal is for it to be actionable for you. I want you to have a notepad, open up, take some notes. It can be a digital or physical, whatever works for you. And then take notes on what you should do to address your company's growth and your evolving needs by using ClickUp. My goal is that you leave with key takeaways that you can implement in your ClickUp workspace as early as this week. But really, I hope that there's 1 or 2 items that you can put into place today. So I'll share 3 tips with you to consider. And really, I hope that these make you a ClickUp wizard because it's a pretty good title to have. We'll talk about why you should lock down user permissions, how to take advantage of using automations, and then taking your ClickUp to the next level by using integrations. So first, I'll talk a little bit about how we use ClickUp today, and then I'll get into it. So we use ClickUp across 5 teams. We use it a little bit for some cross-functional work, specifically our objectives and key results for our company, department, and teams. But for the most part, it's 5 teams that we're going to be talking about. And today I'm actually going to be focused on the product and engineering side of things. So we've been using ClickUp for over 5 years. And it's really in the last 2 years that as we've scaled, I've started to refine how the business operates by using the tool. So the tips I'll share today are things that you can start doing regardless of how many teams you have at your company. Doesn't matter how many spaces you're using or how many users you have, they'll all be something that you can take away with. These tips are really important to put into place as you scale your business with ClickUp. But if it doesn't seem like the right time, just keep them in mind for later. All right, let's get into it. So first things first, lock down your user permissions as more people start using ClickUp. I recommend doing this around the 50 user mark, but definitely do it before 100 users or else you'll end up doing a lot of cleanup at a later time, which is what I had to do last year. It's not very fun, so definitely avoid it. Now, there's lots of people that when they start using ClickUp, they'll give all their users full permission to do everything that they need to do. While this can be really nice because they can make the folders they need, the lists, the statuses, and the custom fields, the problem with this is that you're going to end up with having tons of statuses with similar names or the same names in different folders, which makes it really complicated when you want to report on that at a later time. Or you might have some people that use non-standard naming, and then no one outside of that team has any idea what that status is of the task. So if you have a lot of users that are creating custom fields for their unique needs, you're also probably going to end up with custom fields being set up at the wrong level. What happened to us is that we had a custom field get set up at the workspace level, and we had it there for years before we went to make it required and found out that now we are interrupting all these other teams and their workflows. So what we had to do was set up a new custom field in the right workspace level, at the right space level. And then we actually ended up losing all that historical information because we couldn't do a transfer retroactively and move it all to the new field. So learn from my mistake, limit your user permissions earlier on so that you can make sure your custom fields are created in the right place and really for the right purpose. You want to make sure that you don't end up with too many custom fields and overwhelming your team and making it hard for them to use them. So one thing that we found really helpful is the custom roles. The custom roles let you give a limited number of people a higher level of permission without letting them do anything and everything that they dream of. This has been super helpful in us and something that we've put in place in the last 6 months. And we actually set it up by the role level. So everyone with the same role has the same permission within ClickUp. Next, you're going to want to automate as much as possible. The automations are going to help your teams be more efficient and really reduce that tedious work or the cognitive workload of what needs to happen when. So we actually have more than 200 active automations within the engineering and product workspace. And while this sounds like a lot, we didn't just start off with 200 automations. We started off really slow, only with a handful, And then over time, we've started to really build on these and see what steps are being repeated and then adding in automations to help the teams. So it comes down to there being 5 themes of the automations. They're used to assign individuals, tag users, move tasks, set custom fields, or comment with an action that needs to occur either within or outside of ClickUp. I'll share some of the details. So, assigning individuals. We use automations to assign individuals either based on a required field or the location of the task. This is really helpful for being able to assign an engineering manager when a task is moved into their list, and they can triage and decide when it needs to happen and consider that information as they're planning the week or the sprint. The next one is tagging users. So this one we use to tag a task assignee to set a custom field depending on the status of the task. This can be really helpful for example, they're trying to move a task. They didn't hit a custom field in time for that status. And so we actually tag them and we ask them to set that field. And then we also use automations to notify watchers of downstream workflows that need to occur outside of ClickUp to ensure that they know exactly what to do. An example of this one is tagging the ticket watchers and saying, hey, there's this workflow that you need to do within Zendesk. Here's the name of that workflow and go execute it there. This makes sure that they're not having to reference external documents about what they need to do. We're telling them right at that point of time. When it comes time to move tasks with automations, we do that if they're created in the wrong list or because of a status change. Moving tasks, if they're in the wrong list, is kind of like a safety check, mostly making sure that people aren't setting up and opening tasks in the wrong place, and then they're getting lost from the rest of the team because they weren't looking there for it. So we also use automations to add tasks to specific lists based on a custom status or a tag. And this is really to help with certain priorities that are going on across the organization. Now, if we're setting custom fields with an automation, this is an automation we use literally everywhere in the product and engineering workspace, and it's to set the custom fields that are necessary for our workflows. But specifically for me, it's to make sure that we have some of them set so that for reporting purposes, I know exactly what's happening and I can see historical trends of certain teams. And then the last type of automation we use is a comment with actions that need to happen. There's one specifically I'll describe for you that's actually a multi-action automation, and this is to support our quality assurance team. So if an engineering task is moved from in progress to in review, there needs to be a test case URL in that custom field. If it doesn't contain a test case URL, then the assignee is going to be tagged in a comment and they're going to be asked to add the URL. And the task moves back to in progress because it means that it's really not ready to be in review for the QA team. So while there's some tasks that don't need a test case, we have automation set up for those that set that field as not applicable, and that's based on the custom field or the task location. So while it sounds like a lot and how there's multiple automations set up to support this one workflow, it ensures that all of the appropriate engineering tasks have the test cases linked for the quality assurance team and they can do their job. This is something that, while it was a lot of work to set up, it's really paid off. And now that team no longer has to be pinging people and asking them to set a field because it's already done before they get in there. So whenever someone on my team hears of a task that's being repeated, we always assess if this is something that we could set up an automation for to reduce that cognitive workload off of our teams. This is a really great mindset for you to also have. And if you're not using automations today, or you're only using a handful, you should start talking to your teams and get a better understanding of what their workflows are and identify what types of automations would help when. One thing that could be really helpful is actually going into the automations area and just looking at all the options. It's really incredible what you can do with them. Next, my third tip, integrate as much as possible. There's one integration that you might already be using or thinking of using. That's probably the ClickUp Slack integration. So you can use this integration to create tasks from Slack messages or push specific tasks to Slack channels. We use that for specifically around custom fields. And then there's one integration specifically with Slack that we use, and that's really to help our teams that don't use ClickUp on a daily basis. We use the integration to notify them about comments that they're tagged in to make sure that they don't get missed. So there's one integration that our engineering team really takes advantage of, and that's the integration with GitHub. So we use it so that engineers can easily see pull request information by clicking on the link that's added to the task history. When they click on that link, it takes our engineers directly to the code change in GitHub. And then also when they're looking at a single task, it shows every single commit that was pushed so anyone can see how the code was pushed over time straight from the ClickUp task. The engineering managers recently told me that this is actually their favorite ClickUp integration, and I love to hear things like that. So in the last year, and really realistically in the last 4 or 5 months, what we started to do was use the ClickUp API to build data pipelines between ClickUp and other key tools at Luma. The goal of this is to move data in and out of ClickUp so that folks have access to the information regardless of where they are and what tool they're in. So, for example, the first one we did was using the API to push data into Looker, which is our business intelligence tool. So the key dashboards with ClickUp data live in the same place as our other regularly referenced dashboards. We actually can pull together information from across multiple systems, whether it's from ClickUp or elsewhere, and have it in one dashboard. So, a really valuable and recent project that we completed towards the end of last year was to use the API to build data pipelines between ClickUp and Salesforce. What this does is it allows us to have the client information live within ClickUp and then have relationships between the client task, where all the relevant client information is, and the engineering task, so that the engineering managers and the product managers can see the client data right at their fingertips. This is super helpful in helping with prioritization and determining next steps. Now, there's so many balls in the air at a growing startup or at a growing company, and there's always so much to do. So make sure that you're reevaluating your list of key tools. And then as your business is evolving, think about if you need an integration between ClickUp and the tools that have become more important in your company operations, or maybe a new tool that you've started to use. So our next initiative is really kind of the second half of that Salesforce ClickUp integration, and it's to push the engineering tasks that are linked to customers into Salesforce, and then for those tasks to be visible to our customer success and sales teams. The goal of this is for the sales team and the customer success team to have a holistic view of the client and see all of the engineering related customer activity. So wish me luck on this one because it's a long time coming. So I said you'd get 3 tips, but I actually have a 4th for you. And this was one you definitely should start using today if you're not already. Are you using ClickUp templates? If not, today is the day to start. So depending on the use case, you might decide to use ClickUp forms to ensure that your teams always get the information they need with the required questions. The ClickUp forms are something that we're using more and more, but our kind of original way of using templates was just a regular template, and then the user populates using free text, and there's text within the task body for them to populate. And then more and more, we're using required fields that they have to set when they're opening that task. So once you're using the templates, you have to keep looking at them on a regular basis, like minimum every 4 to 6 months. And this is because you're going to update your templates. There's never something that's going to be perfect. Over time, we've updated them nonstop. Like I can't even count how many times we've updated our templates. Depending on the template, we have it set up so that the task will actually auto set custom fields. It'll be created in a specific location or automatically add tags to the task to help with reporting and creating custom lists that I reference and people across the company use. One thing that you can also do with templates is have checklists that populate within the task if it's always kind of a routine activity that needs to happen when that template gets opened. Another thing that's really nice about templates, and actually took me quite a long time before I realized this was even an option, is that you can actually set it up so that only specific people see specific templates. And this is just so nice because you can really remove the cognitive load of someone's opening a template, they see 10, they're only ever using 3 of them. Don't even show them the other 7. Set it up so that when they open a template and they're going to use one, there's only ever 3 to choose from. This has been really helpful in reducing the confusion with our teams, especially when you have new people joining. They're only trained on certain workflows and they don't even need to know about the other 10 templates you have in your organization. There might only be 3 that they're using, and so just let them see those 3 and really make their life easier. So, most importantly, think about how you can scale up your time and the time of your people by using the automations, the integrations, and the templates. And then don't forget about the user permissions. You'll thank me later. So ClickUp can be the tool to help you scale, but the people that are using it and the process of implementing those changes really matter. We use a lot of change management before we implement changes. We want to make sure that we're understanding our internal user needs, what their challenges are, and then really working with them, getting their buy in, talking about the why before we implement the changes. You also really need to consider the volume of changes that you're asking people to take on, amongst other changes that are happening in the company, in their team, or even within their role. So I personally prefer to do one change at a time, get people used to it, make sure it's working and doing the job before we move on to any other changes. If you're like me and living and breathing operations, there's always going to be more things that you want to improve and changing the way of how things work. ClickUp is exactly the same. So I hope you've written down some action items for you to look into this week, maybe today. Feel free to let me know. I love talking ClickUp Shop, so feel free to reach out and we can keep the conversation going.